Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 8th Planning Board meeting. We'll get right to it with the preliminary subdivision public hearing. In accordance with provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81-T, and the Town of Concord subdivision rules and regulations to review the preliminary subdivision plan application of Bentley Building Group for the improvement of a new roadway and for the creation of two new building lots at 4B Garrison Road and 65X Bedford Street, parcels number 1091-1 -5 and 1092.
Good evening, everyone. Robert Melvin with Stamsky McNary. I'll be representing the applicant on this project. Right, I'll just start by sharing the plan here. Okay.
Questions after you give the presentation.
So here, I'm going to start here with the proof plan of a conventional subdivision here. Just showing the roadway with ending in a cul-de-sac with two new lots off the end here, each served by individual septic systems. The planned drainage would be to provide roof dry wells for the dwellings, as well as provide drainage in the middle here. And sorry, let me just take a step back and talk about the parcels here. So the first parcel we're looking at here is this small rectangular shape. This one here is 4B Garrison Road, and then the larger parcel here would be 65X Bedford Street. Both parcels are currently vacant, with nothing developed inside it, mostly wooded areas. This property does fall within the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, priority habitats. So what we initially did with the project is we submitted we requested a determination with Mass Wildlife for being within this area. And we received a response that we would receive a no-take determination of the endangered species, which is a Blanding's turtle. And the no-take determination did come with some conditions. One of those being that the plan we provided to them would be recorded, and I do not have the plan available on the screen at the moment. I can pull it up later, but what the plan essentially shows is the right-of-way here, as well as this dashed line boundary. And this dashed line boundary represents the proposed limit of restriction for the lot. What we've done is we've voluntarily proposed a restriction on parcel A here, which is the parcel that is outside the right-of-way and outside of lots 1 and 2. Partially, lots 1 and 2 would also be restricted in this case. But we are still looking at the conventional, so let me move on here. This is what we are proposing here. This is a subdivision with waivers requested. And here we can see the restriction area dashed line, similar to the proof plan. And it actually does restrict portions of the right-of-way as well. So here, just talk about the proposal. We have a proposed roadway here to serve the two dwellings. The first waiver we're requesting is a reduction in the pavement width. The required 22 feet is proposed to be reduced to 18 feet wide. We're also proposing a T-turnaround in lieu of a cul-de-sac. It does look very similar to a project we had just reviewed with you guys in the past at 61B Walden Street. And then the third waiver we're requesting tonight is to not provide a sidewalk for the subdivision. And the reason we're requesting these three waivers, most importantly being that we really want to abide by this restriction line that we've proposed to Mass Wildlife. And to do so, we must restrict the development as much as we possibly can. So reducing the pavement width, not providing a sidewalk, and as well as not providing a cul-de-sac would help eliminate a large amount of pavement here and a large amount of disturbance as well as grading, and really keeps the development to a minimum. And then on the other reasons we're requesting these waivers is that we feel it's suitable to provide 18-foot width for the 2-lot subdivision, as it's not going, the traffic volume is not expected to be high on this development with only 2 lots. Similar with pedestrian traffic, we do not expect much here with 2 lots. So that is the reason for the waivers. And then just to talk about the design a bit, you know, like I said, we have a T turnaround here, which is suitable for fire department access. We are providing a low impact stormwater management area here. What we're planning to do, we're still in the design phases, but the plan here is to create a swale here on the western side of the road here and get all the water to the stormwater management area, which is planned to be an infiltration basin. We are also providing roof dry wells for the individual lots, and similar to the proof plan, each lot will be equipped with its own sewage disposal system. And we are going to be providing town water service here as well with a water main extension. And I believe that covers it for my initial presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, the from Mass Wildlife, the documentation there at all, or?
Yes, I do actually have the letter up here.
Okay.
I can show you. It just goes through how we've received a no-take determination, subject to conditions, and then on the second page here, these are the 3 conditions that were enacted. I did mention the plan, and we had submitted showing the restriction boundary, and they've asked us to make that recordable. Another condition is to enact the turtle protection plan. I've seen this before. Usually it involves wildlife surveys as well as providing a boundary around the work area. And then the third is just putting a 5-year period limitation on the approval here.
The board have any questions?
Well, I noticed on the preliminary plan, you showed the turtle protection area cutting off what would on the proof plan be the northern tip of the circle. Does that mean you couldn't build the proof plan at all because it would encroach on the protected area, or am I misunderstanding?
So are you talking about this portion here within the
Yeah,
bold?
that little secant up there, exactly.
Right. No, it wouldn't prohibit us from pursuing this. So as far as I understand, what we're providing is a minimal area in the of development here. And so what we've done is we've maintained that between the two here. And we would ultimately, if the restriction boundary were to change at all, we'd need approval from Mass Wildlife, so we would go back to them. I'd have to pull up the original plan that was submitted to them to see which version is reflected on that. But the boundary is flexible, and it's subject to approval of Mass Wildlife.
Right, okay, I'm looking at your plan. My initial thought was that what would be preferable to the town in terms of reducing overall impervious space would be to build the proof plan here and then to remove the unnecessary turnaround at what is currently the end of Garrison Road. But after your presentation, I see the value of less pavement closer to the protected area.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, I full-heartedly agree. And one thing, I don't believe it's reflected on either sheet here, but there is a sort of a cleared area. I can actually show you on here. So you can see there's sort of this cleared area sort of centered on 65X here. It's really sandy in this area, and it was identified as a turtle breeding site because the turtles like to bury their eggs in the sandy soils here, and they need the warmth from the sunlight. So what we've done is we identified this area here. It's not shown on these plans, but that's sort of what motivated the development here, why everything's kind of pushed down to the west side here, is that cleared area that's very sandy is just about here. So that's why we're trying to really keep everything down here. And to your point, I believe the proposal here further, limits disturbance in that direction.
Right, okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
The board was provided a report from the senior planner.
Okay.
There were no issues or concerns identified of significance by any of the town departments. So the recommendation is to go through the requested waivers. And if there's any questions on the report, I can answer those.
Yeah, that's fine. What else? We can open up the public comment now.
I should speak.
Sure.
My name is Mr. Clifford. So my wife Janet.
Can I get your address?
We have deeds to some of this property. I think it's not.
Sorry, your address for the record? Your address for the record.
643 Bedford Street.
Thank you.
We have deeds and it's a problem. No one's notified us. We didn't know. Actually, I didn't know until today that someone was actually building back there. They don't have clear, I believe they don't have clear title. We'll let a lawyer decide that, but I'm really sorry. Someone should have notified us.
So what I can tell you for this board, it would not have any jurisdiction if there's issues with clear title for the property. As far as notification for the preliminary subdivision plan, we met the requirements for notification of abutters. The town, does not have any requirement or obligation to do a title search for property. Additionally, what was the second comment? Sorry, I'm losing the train of thought already.
It was title and notification.
And those, so those two items. Additionally, this is a preliminary plan. This plan does not have any standing as far as the creation of the subdivision or the lots. It is just a preliminary application to provide the applicant information on certain waivers and whether the board feels those waivers can be granted or not before a definitive plan is submitted. It is not until a definitive plan, should it be approved and recorded, do the lots actually get created. So this does not have any standing as far as approval, and it cannot be recorded.
For the record, PO Box 242, Concord, Massachusetts.
That's our mailing address.
That's our mailing address. Someone should respond.
So I guess the question is, who is responsible for doing the title search? I mean, is it the contracting company or the builder that's potentially gonna build there to do the required property search to make sure that they do have the right to build there?
Legal title is between property owners, would be a civil matter that you would have to address on your own through through the courts if that's what you choose. For any buyer of a property, they would go through as part of that process a title search to whether they have clear title, but it is not something for this board to adjudicate. Or, or be involved in.
So at this point, they have not done a property search then?
I do not know. They have a deed to the property. And, whether somebody wants to contest that deed, it is not for this board to
No, we
adjudicate
understand that.
that conversation.
Well, we're using the venue to notify them. And we have.
Which is fine, but it's not something that the board can take into, consideration. As far as their deliberations under the subdivision control law. Whether there's.
That's your opinion, ma'am, that's
No,
not a
that's
legal.
that's what they have
um,
rules that they abide by.
That would be my opinion as the town planner who's been doing this for 30-some years. If you wish to hire counsel, it still would not become a conversation through this board. That's not within their jurisdiction to address whether somebody has a title claim to private property or not.
Okay,
Okay,
So suppose we were to approve the preliminary plan, that would not in any way affect a matter of title, which is separate from this board, to be very clear. Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
well, we'll get a lawyer.
Yes.
Hi, Tanya Gala, 62 Prescott, with also our abutters, assuming the legal questions are all set. Am I right that if those, you don't give those waivers, then you couldn't go ahead with the plans? That the developer could not go ahead with the plans because it wouldn't meet the wildlife services?
So the applicant has shown a proof plan that is in full compliance with the subdivision rules and regulations.
Right,
So if the board was inclined not to grant waivers, they could submit a definitive plan in full compliance
Mhm.
with the regulations, and the board would have to approve that plan.
yeah, but then the state might not because of the wildlife protection.
So the matter of, natural heritage and what boundary they
Mhm.
will allow or not allow, again, is a separate matter through that state agency.
Yeah, but in essence, if the board grants the waivers, they would be facilitating the developers' plans by making it easier to get approval by the state.
So the letter that, the applicant has already submitted from Mass Wildlife, has a finding of no taking based on the provision that there be this conservation restriction area. And that original boundary would still allow the construction of a fully compliant subdivision with a full cul-de-sac, 22 feet of pavement. So I don't think, it is, again, my opinion, if the board did not grant the waivers, I don't think that would prohibit the developer from moving forward with constructing a fully compliant subdivision.
So this is something that comes up frequently when we consider subdivisions, and it was confusing to me the first time
Mhm.
I dealt with one of these. If they submit a proof of plan that says without any waivers, we are compliant with the subdivision regulations, then by right, they can build that subdivision. Now, they come to us and request waivers, and sometimes these waivers are motivated by, it would be easier for us. Sometimes these waivers are motivated by a reduction in impervious surface. The waivers being requested this evening, the elimination of the sidewalks, the reduction in the pavement width, and instead of a cul-de-sac, a T turnaround are very standard. We grant those almost as a matter of course, particularly things like sidewalks when it's two homes. So nothing they're requesting, those three waivers are unusual. They're ones we see all the time. And we have an interest in those waivers because one of the things that the town is always trying to do, and the planning board, reduce impervious surface.
Right.
Cause it creates fewer problems for stormwater runoff and wastewater. You know, if we don't need to pave over more
Right.
land, we try not to do that. So the 3 waivers are being requested, even if we said no, they still have a proof plan that meets all of the regulations. The waivers that they're coming to us tonight
Mhm.
are really ones that are in the town's best interest to grant. Not necessarily their best interest, but in the town's best interest, and that's what we're representing. So this kind of elimination of the sidewalk, reduction in the width of the road, and a T turnaround instead of cul-de-sac. Those are all great waivers that we grant pretty routinely at this point.
I understand. I just got the impression that in this case, though, it would actually also make it easier to get permission from the wildlife services, and that's kind of,
It certainly provides, more area that's not being developed, that's not being paved over. So if that increases the area that they could set aside for wildlife protection, that may make it easier, but that's not our determination.
No.
We're just looking at the 3 waivers that they
no,
requested.
I meant the state might object to the other plans if they don't have those waivers. If they have what is the usual plan,
Mhm.
that the state might not grant the permission. And therefore, these waivers are in essence facilitating the actual development. And I don't know if that is something you would necessarily have.
We don't really consider whether the waivers make it easier or more difficult. We consider whether the waivers are in the best interest of the town.
Um. So. What matters to me a lot is that it's not only the turtles, but also there's a lot of wildlife habitat that's going to be destroyed. And for that reason, I would not necessarily want to facilitate the development itself. But other than that, I would, and I know this is a preliminary plan, but I would at the very least request that there is, we are on the side that will be developed, that there is plenty of space that has trees around the border, and that there is consideration for wildlife corridors. So I really do worry about wildlife habitat, and I want to also, I noticed in the senior planners report that the natural resources had not said anything, and I'm wondering if that is because it's the state wildlife department deals with that. Therefore, they didn't feel the need to say anything, or, I mean, I'm just wondering why the natural resources did not express similar concerns to mine.
The comments from the natural resources director, she did not have any issues or concerns with the plan as presented. And it may be because natural heritage is responsible for, that area, or I think clarification if the board wishes, but it may be because of the area that's going to be restricted that circles the lot, but.
Can we find out just also for future situations like this? That way we know if they're gonna defer to the state in that situation.
Find out, so I can specifically, ask that of her, as part of the definitive plan, application, yeah.
Sorry.
My name is Esther DeShine. I'm one of the abutters at 42 Garrison Road. And I have one concern and a couple of questions, but first of all, I support the waivers of no sidewalk and a smaller, because it's less pavement. And that goes to my concern, which I think is already addressed. One day when I was sitting, there was a terrible rain that came down and the cul-de-sac at Garrison Road, it didn't flood, but water started to kind of accumulate. And so my driveway acts as a funnel and the neighbor's driveway acts as a funnel. And I just want to make sure, and I think you're already addressing this, that when you make the plan for that driveway, that it doesn't kind of direct water into that cul-de-sac. Do you know what I mean? Because right now, the water that falls on that space is being absorbed by the ground and it could potentially like lead to more water, because, you know, we get more rain. So that's just one thing that I wanted to make sure that, you know, I think you already have plans for storms and just making sure that it's not gonna add any more water flow to that cul-de-sac.
So I can clarify, as part of the definitive plan submission, they are required to provide completely engineered grading and drainage plans.
Great.
Additionally, a stormwater drainage report. They are required to show pre and post runoff. They are required to show that that is all contained within the site and can be handled by the stormwater drainage system that's being proposed. Also, Garrison Road is a public road.
Yeah.
And Concord Public Works Engineering, that will be also part of the review where that new road meets the Garrison Road cul-de-sac. They will have to show that they are not directing any stormwater drainage towards the public way.
And then one quick question, there was something in the natural resources about a 5-year limit. Is that, did I mishear something about a 5?
So that is one of the requirements in natural heritage is finding of no taking. There were 3 conditions as I understand it. One condition is has to do with the conservation, the restriction area, and having that be shown on a plan and being recorded at the Registry of Deeds. The other is they are required to, it's called a turtle plan, but it is a specific plan that deals with, it's a very specific type of barrier that goes all the way around the limit of work. It deals with monitoring. It deals with making sure that turtles, you know, aren't trying to come into the job site. I think there's actually even like a wildlife biologist, you know, reviews things. And then the 5th one is natural heritage's finding of no taking is only good for 5 years.
So does that mean after 5 years, the rest of the land could be developed, or how does that, what does that mean?
No, and I think Robert can correct me. I believe their finding of no taking is only good for 5 years. If the project does not move forward, then I think they have to go back to natural heritage.
But that land would be put in natural heritage for forever.
So the property is currently within a, I'm gonna say like a mapped overlay of endangered or rare species. That overlay is something that Mass Wildlife Natural Heritage has throughout the state. And those are just overlay designations in certain areas based on, you know, how, I don't know the methodology that they use to make those areas. That stays there. So anybody who does work within those areas needs to go through their approval process. The applicant has gone through that approval process, received a finding of no taking.
Got it.
That finding is only good for 5 years.
Okay, got it. But the land, Mark, would you own the land that's in that set
Sure.
aside, or would the new owners of the 2 lots be the owners of the land, or would the state be the owners of that natural?
So for the record, Mark White, Benton Building Court, 33 Independence Road. There'd be some sort of ownership other than myself, in the intent being that it wouldn't be developed.
In the letter,
The intent being that it would not be developed.
would not be developed, okay.
Might I ask follow-up question on that? So Mark A was 62 Prescott Road in the butter. Would there be a third-party holder of a conservation restriction? Is that what you're talking
I don't
about?
think there's gonna be a conservation restriction. We're still working with the state on that, but there'd be some sort of restriction. But I don't believe I don't think they wanted a conservation restriction.
Okay. And which department is that exactly?
We're dealing with natural heritage.
Natural Heritage. Thank you.
Yeah, Tanya gave us, I would just reiterate my concern about giving this facilitation kind of pre-approval of the waivers, and I would feel better if they came to you after they completed their dealings with the state and not beforehand to facilitate any prohibition they might get from that.
So it's my understanding they have already gone through natural heritage and received a finding of no taking. They have already gone through that process.
Well, I thought the answer was a little bit squishy about whether they had gone through it on the preliminary plan only, or both it and the proof plan. But
I'll let
nevertheless,
Rick or
Abby's
Robert
points-
speak, but I
Yeah.
believe they went through with the proof plan. And if the
Correct.
waivers are granted, then they would have to go back.
And do the proof plan. Yeah, it was when I
Do
asked
the
at the
preliminary
beginning
plan.
about that northern arc of the proof plan, I was unclear on the answer.
So
Yeah,
we
I can
stayed
clarify
on
on that.
Mass Wildlife with several iterations. And they kept pushing us away from that open field that Robin had showed us. So this was the final plan that they looked at and they said verbally, yes, we agree with this. and we
Wait,
agree
which
with
was the final one, the preliminary or the
it. Well, it
proof?
was both.
Excuse me,
Both.
I
It
can
was both.
I can clarify this. What I have on the screen here is the plan that was approved. This is the approved restriction line, and this does align with the proposed subdivision with waivers, not the proof plan. So this is what Mass Wildlife has seen. This is the last plan they have seen.
Okay, so they did not explicitly approve enough land to build the proof plan, but they might if you had to go back and ask them about it. Since
Right,
it's
and
only a
just-
small expansion.
As a reminder, this restriction area was a voluntary restriction that Mass Wildlife, we had submitted to Mass Wildlife with our application, and they accepted that this restriction would be placed as a condition of approval. But there was no discussion of exact areas or exact lines, and nothing has been written into stone at this point. So, we have no reason to believe they would deny a proof plan, the proof plan that we've been showing. And as Mark White pointed out, they've seen many iterations. I wasn't involved in this process, but I would imagine they have seen the proof plan. I can get an answer for you guys on that. But again, we have no reason to believe they wouldn't accept the proof plan.
Thank you.
So what the board can do, since this is only a preliminary plan, the board can condition the preliminary plan that is part of their definitive plan subdivision application, that they provide, I guess, the final determination from natural heritage on their requirements and the restriction boundary.
Everyone is stopped, so. I think that's it for public comment, so. We go to a vote on this.
Well, the board should go through the 3 requested waivers,
Yep.
and make a finding on whether you feel they should be granted or not.
All right, so the first waiver is the minimum pavement width in the residence A is 22 feet in order to minimize impervious area impact. They're looking to go to 18 feet.
Sorry, didn't we say this was residence B? Sorry. Just didn't, I don't know if that matters at all.
Yeah, it is residence B.
Sorry, what was the question?
It's residence A versus residence B.
Uh-huh.
So is it the same minimum pavement width?
Of 22 feet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we wasn't scoring us up what we approve or don't.
So if you want, I can just bring up the report. That might be.
That'd be nice.
So the first waiver, yes, in residence B, the minimum pavement width is 22 feet. So the applicant is proposing 18 feet with 2-foot shoulders.
No objection.
Yeah, I don't do it. So we just move for, what do we do?
Motion or?
Go
We need a
through all
motion or
three
just-
and then.
Is there anyone who doesn't think that this is appropriate? This is the question.
So it would be the basis for the granting, the finding for the basis for the granting of the waiver, which the board discussed, the reduction in impervious surface, reduction in stormwater runoff. Comment was that, limits, further limits the disturbance towards the turtle habitat area. Those would be 3 reasons for finding to grant the waiver.
That sounds appropriate.
Okay.
Yes.
So we take all these 3 together, we don't do them individually. So,
You can do them individually, or you can, make one finding to grant the waivers based on the findings and the conversation and discussion that the board had. So.
But we do consider them individually, like
Yes.
if somebody submits a request for 15 waivers and we want to deny 12 of them, that's totally within our purview. So we
okay,
consider each of them individually.
Okay.
In this instance, because they're kind of 3 standard ones, we can discuss them and then
Okay.
collectively.
The second waiver deals with the requirement for the fully compliant cul-de-sac. And the applicant is proposing the T turnaround. The fire department does not have any issues or concerns with the T turnaround. They are able to maneuver their apparatus. Again, it's only 2 lots. Again, the reduction in impervious surface, stormwater drainage runoff. And allows the limit of disturbance to be further away from the turtle habitat. Those would be the 4 reasons.
I think that's appropriate. Yep.
And then the last waiver is a requirement that there be a sidewalk on one side. Again, for reduction in impervious surface, it is only serving 2 lots. Again, the same 4 waivers. I would note that the request for proposals to hire a consultant to update the subdivision rules and regulations went out today. And this is one of those requirements. When a board routinely grants a waiver over and over and over again, which the planning board has done, say probably for the last 10 years for 2 lot subdivisions. That's a strong indicator that you shouldn't be requiring a sidewalk for 2 lots. Anyways, so that would be the 4 reasons the board may consider for granting a waiver.
Yeah, that's appropriate.
Great.
So in the senior planner's report, should the board grant the 3 waivers, there were recommended conditions for the information to be submitted with a definitive subdivision application. And then based on the conversation tonight, the board would add a condition regarding the submission of a final determination from Natural Heritage regarding the restriction area as part of the definitive plan submission.
Yes, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we go to a motion.
Yep, so I can bring up I think, the agenda memo.
Mhm.
You could lay it on the side.
So I can move to grant the preliminary plan. It should grant the requested waivers based on the findings as discussed, adopt the information as presented in the senior planner's report with the additional requirement noted earlier. With recommended conditions and approved preliminary plan for Bentley Building Corp. For the improvement of a new roadway and for the creation of 2 new building lots at 4B Garrison Road and 65X Bedford Street. Parcels number 1091-1-5 and 1092. In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 41, Section 81T in the Town of Concord subdivision rules and regulations, and authorize the town planner to sign decision on behalf of the authority.
Get a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The next application is 290 Baker Ave. The board received the draft decision late this morning after getting engineering's revised comment letter yesterday. Sue did provide some of her wonderful edits.
I'd like to go on the record and say thank goodness for Sue.
I know.
And her thoroughness.
You'll miss me when I'm gone.
We will desperately miss you at some point when you're gone.
Well, most of them are formatting, syntax, commas, those types of.
Was anything
items.
substantive besides the EPA one?
So one,
Did you close the door?
no,
No, you can't close those.
We can't, no, but we can ask them to shut or move.
Take it outside.
Well, go down further down the hall as well.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well,
Yeah, right.
They're making their way.
Thank you.
the only, one, question, well, actually, there were two questions that, Sue had. One in the site plan, finding D regarding the adequacy of the arrangement of parking and loading spaces. Adding a sentence, the conversion of some of the spaces to call small car spaces is not detrimental to the adequacy of the arrangement of spaces. And then, the second question had to do in engineering's letter. They had a recommended condition that the applicant provide documentation that a stormwater pollution prevention plan was not required, given disturbance over an acre. The applicant has verified that maintenance and repaving, just repaving of a parking lot does not trigger the requirement for a SWIP. So I will add that sentence.
Okay.
Into finding criterion A, which deals with surface water drainage, and can add that statement in there. Other than that, I have always spelled catch basin 2 words. Engineering says it's 1.
I don't care as long as it's consistent in the
And I'll
document
make sure-
itself.
I'll make sure it's consistent. And
It was just
And I
Nothing
think,
else matters. It's just
and I think that, that's it.
type of spaces,
Yeah.
punctuation.
And that's it. So unless the board has, questions, I think, the extra time, was appreciated. They were able to, have a conversation with engineering and, I think adding the additional leaching catch basin, addresses engineering's concern with the stormwater runoff coming into Baker Avenue. And it was helpful.
Motion to, yes.
I failed to print out the agenda memo, so I can't read it off to move to approve. Yeah, I move
Go ahead.
to approve the application of Concord Property Management on behalf of Concord Woods Condominium Association under zoning bylaw section 11.8 site plan review for parking lot modification to provide ADA compliant spaces and reduce impervious area while maintaining the existing number of parking spaces at 290 Baker Ave, parcel number 3794-A1-39 with the conditions discussed, including the addition
Based on the decision as discussed this evening.
based on the
the
decision discussed this evening. Yes,
Perfect.
there we
Thank
go.
you.
Can you get a second, please? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we'll move on to administrative business. Public comments limited to 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes allocated to any one speaker. Public comments limited to items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone online?
You do, but I don't have any comments. Thanks.
So I think we'll move on to our next item, the planning board 2025-26 goals and projects discussion.
So I can share my screen if that's. Um, So as, with every year, we start and, again, this is, what I'm showing is, Sue's great edits. Which most from, again, thank you. I feel like I'm improving because they're getting fewer and fewer. I still can't spell, so, but my grammar and punctuation and everything is getting so. So unless the board had any, questions or comments about the update from what you did last year. I think Sue had one question, regarding item 7.
That was just wording.
So, town meeting, planning board sponsored zoning and general bylaw amendments. The EVC, Concord Housing Development Corporation, I'm gonna say like the planning board was a co-sponsor. Cause the
Okay.
board submitted those warrant articles.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I checked the warrant and it listed them as the sponsor, but we can co-sponsor, yes. Okay,
Correct. So
fine then.
I don't think that
okay,
technically makes a big difference in, in your memo.
all right.
And for item 8, yes, I can say, mixed use zoning. And then put, combined business residents in the zoning bylaw or
Sure.
or something like
Cool.
that, just to clarify. So thank you.
That's not interesting.
And,
And the final item for upcoming goals, in item 10, I just was confused by one word there, but
we're not there yet. So for this coming year, The first item is definitely gonna be MBTA communities, and working with our GIS team. To come up with a compliant district for the contiguous requirement. I don't think there's anything else to add. Item 2 is the ADU bylaw. So far, I have, the building commissioner and I have, we'll be having a conversation with town council. I think at this point, we have 15 different questions to go over with them on items in EOHLC's regulations, and how those are going to require additional amendments to the ADU bylaw. So until we meet and flesh out different things at that time, then I will, as the board moves forward, I'll prepare an actual detailed memo that goes through all of the items that we've identified, and identifies how the bylaw can be amended to correct or bring it into compliance with the regulations.
I just had one typo on that one. It was January 31st, 29-25. Should be 2025.
Oh, I missed,
Good catch.
I never
Okay.
look at numbers.
Took me 3 reads to figure out why it looked wrong. So.
That was the found it.
That sentence.
It just matters that we found it.
It's fine.
Then we get there.
Item 3 is the wireless overlay district. That was part of the board's conversation with Article 41. And so I will be again drafting out kind of a scope and a time frame with a conversation with town council. It starts initially with, is the current bylaw, can it be amended and fixed? Or are we talking about deleting in its entirety and something starting new? So that's just, you know, a conversation, and it may be that, you know, the board may work with town council and, you know, parts of it can be done for 2026, and you know, some other things may have to wait till 2027. So until we have that conversation with town council on how to, you know, approach this, I won't be able to, you know, again, it'll be another detailed memo to the board as you move forward in this conversation, but I believe that is something the board is committed to doing, along with, you know, conversations with the select board as well. So I should have started off with the first statement that was in my agenda memo. So the select board is currently going through a similar conversation about their goals and for the next year. So I ultimately, whether the board wants to have a conversation about all of these things and then hold off finalizing this until the select board finalizes their goals as well, to, you know, make sure that everybody is, has the same path forward. So that's something that for the board to consider. Item 4 is, you know, finishing your work with Emily and Innis Associates. So she will be preparing, you know, a draft bylaw and amendments for consideration by the board throughout the, I'm gonna say late summer and fall, for the board to have additional conversations and determine whether you wish to move forward with a warrant article for 26 or not. So that is something that you're working on, and will, you know, complete that task and then make a determination whether to move forward or not. 5 is gonna be MCI Concord. Not sure the level of involvement for the board at this point in time. It is still something that's evolving. I do know that the advisory board is discussing the report that their consultant submitted, and they will be, you know, disseminating that and you know, getting feedback on that. And so I think the conversation on how MCI zoning moves forward and a timeline has not been set, but one way or another, the planning board's going to be significantly involved, either as a stakeholder and constant participant with the advisory board, or whether the advisory board gets the final, consensus on how to move forward with zoning and then hands it over to the planning board. Not sure about the timeline at this point. Given the advisory board, I think still wants to have public input and conversations. I'm not sure we're looking at the annual town meeting 2026. It may be a fall town meeting in 2026, but that hasn't been finalized yet either. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4 items are for consideration, whether taking into the knowledge of the 5 things that you will have to be doing is under my opinion, the first 5 things, and so whether you want to move forward with additional things. First one is joint parking, which I have to personally apologize to the board for the screw up with the presentation. It was completely my misstep on working with Mark, going to the League of Women Voters, having again changes, doing those changes, and then not submitting the revised final presentation. So that is all me. I do think that confusion led to potentially there not being a 2/3 vote. So whether the board wishes to move forward with the same warrant article and proper presentation, the board can do that. You again have that submitted to the warrant, have the public hearing, and then make a determination whether to move it to town meeting or not. It's up to the board. Again,
For one, would like to give it a try. I think it would have a very good chance with resolving various issues with the presentation. I could do that unless somebody else wanted to, in which case I'd be happy to give it up to somebody else. But then if if other people disagree, then so be it.
I think with the right messenger, I would be very surprised if it didn't pass. I thought of what we proposed at town meeting this year, that this was the least controversial, other than like consent agenda, but like this wasn't,
But it could be much more clearly presented as
yeah,
that.
I think with a different presentation and a different messenger, I think that this gets approved, and I think there's value in that.
Okay.
But it also depends, as you said, when we come to the full slate of what we're proposing, if this is low hanging fruit and we have bigger items, then we can always push it back, but the
Yes.
work's been done.
Yeah.
correct.
In terms of,
That's the
you
big.
know, it's presentation and that, but we have it, it's in our pocket, so.
We can always see what we, kind of take a risk and see what we think is going to go on the consent calendar at that point too. I know, but
Yeah, well,
I mean,
we'll see. I don't think it would be something that would be put on the consent.
not this, but I'm saying other items though, like, so we would have, enough resources to handle doing the presentation and then others, not this one. Be on the consent calendar.
Okay, so I will draft something, an explanation for that section for the board to review. not sure when the select board's gonna have their goals finalized, but, the letter will be on, the board's agenda immediately following, when their goals are finalized. Number 7, deals with our lighting bylaw, which is you have a memo from the senior planner that outlines, potential amendments for consideration. Again, I don't see this as being a huge lift. And, you know, Christine can start pulling together, you know, different examples and, I do think where that lighting section is, it's within the parking section. It may need to come out of there and be, you know, and be its own real
Yeah.
section. So we're not just talking about, parking, lighting. The board through site plan approval has inserted lighting as far as on buildings and those, but that should be explicitly talked about. So that's number 7. So the board wants to include that currently. I would just pull items from Christine's memo and insert them there. 8 is the next round of housekeeping amendments. You got my apologies. You got an email late. Both Sue and I aren't expecting anybody to have reviewed all of that. But I think Sue and I did, let me say, chat over email. We're gonna meet, go through, you know, again, kind of like we have the past 2 years, you know, triage, you know, housekeeping amendments, and then bring something forward to the board.
This year, I think, is a little different from the previous ones in that there are a few items where the board really has to, it's not just an obvious correction, it's, you know, this might mean this thing, this might mean that thing, and we have to decide which it actually means. So it's not a heavy lift, but not just, oh, well, that's obvious, some small decision making.
Does that mean more specificity, being more specific?
In most cases, in a lot of cases, yeah, it could be read in one of 2 ways, and it's, was written so long ago, nobody remembers. And we have to think about what do we want it to mean?
What's the intent there?
Yeah, what's the intent?
Right.
Yeah, or, for example, we don't currently refer to a lot of, we should protect the character of the town and, you know, stormwater management and this, and we never refer to the sustainability principles. And shouldn't we add that to the list where we refer to all those things? So that's not ambiguity, but we have to decide, do we want to do that? But it's not rocket science to decide a question like that. Yeah.
I think the, one of the conversations that Sue and I will have, you know, going through this list, is I don't think the board could do all of this in a single warrant article. So it may be, you know, pulling out, you know, I don't know how many.
I'm
At a
guessing it
time,
will be
right.
one article for the consent calendar that we would expect to go on the consent calendar and one article that we would not expect, or maybe
Right.
a couple.
So again, triaging, you have your, you know, tier 1,
Yeah.
you know, commas, ands, we continue to find them. Which is, I explained to the board, no less than, you know, 9 people review the zoning bylaw before it goes to be printed. And, there's always some 29, 25 in there. So I will, you know, write that up, be a little bit more explicit, and can leave that on the list for now as well. Number 9 is the tree preservation bylaw and tree preservation rules and regulations. Again, Christine prepared a pretty detailed memo that goes through and outlines some of those amendments to clarify things now that it's been in practice for a few years. And so I again don't see that as a heavy lift. Don't see it as being highly controversial either. Especially if it's clarifying things. We'll make sure we work with, local developers and our, engineers and the arborists they work with to get feedback to make sure, it is clarifying things. So I think that can probably, just stay as well. And then item 10, as I said, the RFP for the subdivision rules and regulations update has gone out. I think it is going to take a full year to do that, but my goal is to have the board have a public hearing to adopt new regs by June 30th of next year.
Like it. It's aggressive.
It is aggressive.
Well, just because the sheer number of kind of other town stakeholders in the subdivision, I mean, the number of people that we consult, and we ask for opinions of just in a decision, imagine changing regulations, that's everybody.
8 different departments or divisions.
Yeah.
So, but, luckily, in 2007, very few of the other departments or divisions had their own design standards. And so standards automatically just had to be incorporated. So now a lot of standards can be taken out and just reference to other division department standards inserted. So I'm hopeful it's not as, it won't be too bad, but to Sue's one question, it actually is a statewide contract. So the state goes through and does procurement for services and creates a contract of approved vendors for different services and does this statewide contract that municipalities can hire vendors for all different types of services. Planning, zoning, and engineering is one of them. For renting porta potties is another one. Office supplies. I mean, there's like 70 something different statewide
I
contracts.
had no idea the state pre-approves that
Yeah.
for the sake of municipalities.
Yep, there's.
Electricians.
Well,
Right.
that's great. I had no idea. Thanks for clarifying.
So what that means is that we can submit a request for proposals through the vendors on the statewide contract. And then don't have to go through the more rigorous, Chapter 30B procurement requirements,
Yeah.
notification in the central register, legal notices in the paper and all of that. So
It eliminates the internal strife. That's what it does. Yeah, it does a lot. Yeah.
And then, the 11th item is something that you'll do probably, I don't know if I'll have time to update your action items list from Envision Concord for your July 29th meeting. It may not be till your August meeting, but that's something the board has done every year, since, it was adopted in 2018. I would like to congratulate the board. I think you are the only board that does it every year.
I would like to congratulate the board's very excellent
Yes.
staff report.
Yeah, well,
On grounds of which we actually do that every
Yeah.
year.
It's, I think it's helpful.
So in case 11 is not enough goals, I would like to float an idea to the board. We've been trying to, the whole town, especially in Envision Concord, but the planning board as part of this have been trying to improve walkability and the ability for people to live their lives without having to drive for every last solitary thing that they do. And one of our plus we have our goal townwide of improving, broadening the tax base, because we're almost entirely on a residential tax base and hardly any commercial tax base. And I've been wondering if we should try to pursue some way of rezoning small areas in a few places in town to allow some kind of lightweight commercial area. If you think about 9 Acre Corner, take the farms out, and there's like a restaurant and the corner store, and I've forgotten exactly what's there. And if you could just walk to get to a cafe or a corner store or even a personal service shop, that might be an interesting thing to have around town. And if it was, not just general business zoning, people might not think, oh God, so much traffic of everybody coming from all over the place. It might be worth having, particularly when we have the land use working group and we're thinking, the town is thinking about, doing something with the old Peabody School. There's also MCI Concord, although that would probably be more developed. And maybe we should try to come up with some kind of zoning for that. We'd have to work around spot zoning, but I just thought I would float that idea as something we could consider it if the board likes thinking about it.
So, Sue had emailed, me about this and I, kind of thought about it and, there's a lot on your plate, for next year, which kind of concerns me and some big ticket things. But the other, what I consider from a planning perspective, a near-term reality is, it took 2.5 years to update the long-range plan. And 2030 is not that far, so the planning division will make a capital request to again hire a consultant to update the long-range plan. And ideally, if you think about having that adopted before 2030, you're talking about beginning the process in 2027. And I think looking at that idea and how to facilitate those types of walkability and the neighborhood village. I think about where my mom grew up in Wisconsin and probably even like the North End. You had the little convenience store and little mom and pop restaurant right there on the corner, in a dense neighborhood, and everybody walked there. And so I think that's kind of a good concept to think about. But I do think it would have to be on that more holistic planning discussion.
And that seems reasonable to me, but I did want to bring it up tonight, particularly, for example, with the select board thinking, or the land use working group thinking about what to do with the Peabody property. That people have this in mind to think, before it gets, I don't know, rebuilt as 100% housing. To consider maybe, but I do see we really have too much to deal with this year and we shouldn't make it.
But I do
goal
think there's
for
a
this year.
way to think about this as we look at the zoning changes that we are going to take on, things like lighting, things like parking. Keeping the idea of enhancing walkability in our mind when we're making those changes. So if we're making changes to parking, does that make it easier for somebody to park here and walk in this zone? If we're changing lighting, is it all of a sudden, oh God, now everything's gonna be pitch black? Nobody's gonna wanna walk there. How do we balance that need? So keeping this idea of encouraging walkability in the back of our mind as we're making other changes. I like the idea of taking that on as a long-term goal. I think there's some short-term ways to start to incorporate, we already kind of do that with goals for sustainability, certainly, but folding that in as a more conscious effort on our part of, are these changes going to, increase walkability, ease of access, or will they decrease it? Just as a matter of like routine when we're considering any kind of changes we're making.
So that also might be a statement that you want to put in this letter is, it is part of the, the planning board's review of zoning, and applications and projects. Site plan is keeping in, that mind sustainability, but also walkability.
Yeah, we talked about like the best interests of the town. One of those interests also includes,
Walking and biking to things,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it'll probably be a good idea to try to get some of the stakeholders involved early, like ABC, because they were the ones that would benefit the most, from that.
Or certainly have an awful lot to say on the matter,
Mhm.
yeah.
Because if you start doing that, then you have to have a destination for those people to go to.
Right,
Right.
Whether they ride their bike or they walk to it.
Right.
Whether that's a restaurant, a dry cleaner,
right.
or a house,
So I think,
all that has to be.
yeah,
considered.
I think there's actually gonna be a lot of, I'm gonna say community conversation, synergy, that also will start with Concord Public Works, and, the capital funding, that's gonna be provided, Public Works to look at things. So I do think there's gonna be a lot of synergy around that. So at this point, I will make, the edits to, the letter, and then wait for the select board to finalize their goals, and then provide those along with the revised letter to the board on the agenda for another discussion.
Okay, let's go into planning board liaison appointments for 2025 and 26.
Yeah, let me bring up the agenda, I'm sorry.
Oh, I think, sorry, we missed a hand. Carol Savoy.
Yeah, hi, I'd like to make a public comment. Is now the time, or do you want me to wait till you continue through your agenda? I just wanted to make it on your goals for 2026.
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask the planning
Oh,
board to,
Sorry, for the record, can you
sorry.
identify you?
Thank you, Sue. Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street. I'd like to ask the planning board to stay focused on the major projects already in progress because they are substantial, time-sensitive, and critical to Concord's future. First, the MBTA community zoning is not yet in full compliance. The town has 1 year to address complex GIS mapping, density requirements, and floodplain conflicts. This will require careful analysis and multiple scenarios to find a workable solution. Second, MCI Concord zoning is just beginning. With the recent release of the visioning report, the planning board is expected to take a leading role in drafting new zoning. This will be a significant and detailed effort. Third, the wireless overlay zoning needs a complete overhaul to comply with federal law and court rulings. This issue has gone underaddressed for too long and remains a major point of concern for many residents and businesses. And fourth, the subdivision rules and regulations, which date back to 2007, are finally being updated. This is a foundational document that will shape how Concord grows for decades to come and requires extensive collaboration with staff, consultants, and the community. Given the scale and urgency of these efforts, I respectfully ask the board not to move forward with combined business residential zoning at this time. While it may be worth revisiting down the road, right now it risks diverting time and attention away from projects that are not only more immediate, but far more consequential. I also strongly recommend that the joint parking bylaw not be brought forward again. The proposal was clearly rejected by voters, not because of confusion, but because it lacked public support. Let's respect that outcome and avoid reintroducing measures that the town has already voted down. Let's focus our time, energy, and resources on the work that will truly shape Concord's future: MBTA compliance, MCI zoning, wireless regulations, and subdivision reform. These are the projects that will have lasting impact on the character of our town and directly contribute to the long-term well-being and quality of life for Concord residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The board will take those items into consideration.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think that's it on that. We'll move on back onto planning board liaison appointments for 2025 and 2026. I apologize, I missed the hand. Laura?
So at a previous meeting, Rob volunteered and has been designated to the land use working group. Andrew designated as the member for the community preservation committee, and Sue volunteered to be the liaison for MCI Concord Advisory Board. All the other items in green are last year's appointments. So the first one being Mark Giddings was the Hanscom Field Advisory Committee. The designated member is from the select board. It's not from the planning board. So I'm not sure if the planning board wants to have a liaison.
If the select board's getting the reports, but we're not, I don't see any benefit to us tying up a resource on that. I don't know if anyone else's opinion is on that.
No, I agree.
Same here.
Next is the housing groups. Abby it's the Concord Housing Authority, Concord Housing Development Corporation, Concord Housing Foundation, and the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. They usually have a housing roundtable quarterly, and that's, that's about the extent of that. I think, of the liaison. I don't know if you get the agendas and just monitor the agendas for those, but that would be the housing groups. And then we have the Climate Action Committee. There hasn't been a liaison for a while. And I'm not sure the status of the Climate Action Committee. There's, with no sustainability director, so I don't know if the board just wants to leave that vacant for now. And then if they move forward, Wendy has her hand up.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that the Climate Action Committee is proceeding with its action, and they're going to be revising the plan this year. Although I don't really know that the planning board needs to have a liaison. It's just my opinion, but I'm happy to share anything if something planning related comes up.
Great.
Sounds good.
And then there's the Transportation Advisory Committee. I know Pat's been going to that, and she's not here, so.
So she'll continue to do that.
To everything because she's not here.
And then Select Board is generally the chair.
So.
And so that's just, again, monitoring the agendas and then going to the chair's breakfast. And there's the West Concord Advisory Committee. I don't know if Alan or Greg would probably be like the most logical liaison to the West Concord Advisory Committee.
That's fine, yeah, or I could do it too, it doesn't, I just came off.
Learn something new.
I just came off the West Concord Advisory.
Well, that can do it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So, and then there's also the Economic Vitality Committee. So I don't know if Greg, if you had enough of WCAG and want to try EVC.
Absolutely, that's fine too.
And Alan, if you want to try WCAG,
You guys can rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
No, I'll do Economic Vitality, so.
I'll do the West Concord.
okay.
Yeah.
And then we have 2229 Main Street. Andrew, you were the.
Yeah, sort of monitoring that. I can continue to do that, that's fine, it's not left. Unless anyone else wants to.
So I guess, so starting with starting with housing groups, Abby, did
Yeah,
you want to
that's
stay
fine.
with that? Okay. And then we'll get Pat TAC and then um, you go by Greg or Gregory?
Greg is fine, yeah.
Andrew, and then Magic. Again, not really a heavy lift.
Hey, Elizabeth, there is no West Concord advisory, and I'm sorry, not West Concord, the 2229 advisory committee. They fulfilled their charge and the committee is not meeting. But there's an oversight committee, but I don't think you've attended that as a liaison in the past.
No, I've just looked at what the materials are online because I get all of the stuff from
Okay.
EPA.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so we can remove that and then, we can leave Pat as, Magic. Or, I think the, Community Preservation Committee it's not a light, it's not a light committee.
Well, it's very light for a lot of the year and then it just about.
It's light right now.
You,
It's light right now, and then it'll, come September.
but it won't be.
So if this works for everybody, that looks good.
That looks good.
Great. Okay, I will make it so.
Okay, so the next item is planning board signatory pages, haven't signed.
So the board actually, in the agenda memo, the board actually has to move and make a motion regarding that.
As it's written in the agenda memo.
I think, yes.
Okay, I make a motion to authorize the chair, vice chair, clerk, or town planner to execute, certify, and endorse approval of plans presented to the board pursuant to chapter 41 and related certificates, releases, and other instruments, and any said persons are authorized to act alone under this authority.
Can I get a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
And now, we pass it around. There's actually two different sheets, so you do have to sign both of them.
The liaison?
Sure.
Let's do that. So, planning board liaison, time planner updates.
Other than the RFP, and I guess the only other update is there may be somebody who's looking at redeveloping the gas station at 166 Com Ave to keep it as a gas station and a small convenience store. And then, but they are also possibly looking at maybe 4 units on the second floor. And also working with Neshoba Bakery and the parking layout to,
please.
so that's, so if you remember the previous proposal that came through, had their own driveway. They are actually working with Neshoba Bakery to consolidate the one driveway.
Yeah.
Lay out the parking in a logical manner. So that's something that's kind of bubbling up, so that's kind of exciting.
Do we have any sense of Newbury Court?
No.
No.
So I mean, the town clerk, I think it was 2 weeks after town meeting. We did get the submission to the Attorney General in. So the Attorney General has 90 days. So I imagine Newbury Court won't move forward
Until that's done.
Until the final approval from the AG has happened.
So I attended a couple of MCI Concord meetings of the land use subcommittee and the main committee, and maybe Elizabeth, you can check if I understood this correctly. But what I got from the main meeting is that Mass Dot, the Department of Transportation, has a 5-year timeline for deciding what to do with the rotary. And it seems hard to rezone. Unless the property is rezoned uniformly, it seems hard to rezone without knowing where the roads will be. Because, you know, if you want to put the commercial next to the road and you don't know where the road is, I don't know what to do with that. Is it really getting pushed out by 5 years? It was very clear at the meeting that it's all up in the air, and MassDOT could come back tomorrow and say, well, we finalized our plans, but that seems unlikely.
So again, that's why in your memo, it's really,
Vague.
it's really too early
Yeah.
to tell what the timeline is
Mhm.
going to be.
Yeah.
I believe, MassDOT is, in a process of looking at the preferred, alternatives to move forward with design. And it would be the design and engineering process that could take up to 5 years. Not 5 years to decide what they want to do. I think it's
If
5
there
years.
was a layout, then it could be rezoned. A general layout without knowing the design details, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I do think MassDOT's intention is to look at a reconfiguration within the current right of way and possibly, utilizing land where the parking lot across the street is and but
Right.
I don't think any of the alternatives they have looked at go through the prison property or things like that.
Right, well, I wouldn't expect them really to move Route 2, but just the location of Commonwealth Ave makes a difference to rezoning, so, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but relocating Commonwealth Ave, they only have state jurisdiction,
Into the
Maybe.
parking lot, well, but they could use it.
No, I don't, so I don't know where the state right of way ends once you get off the rotary, but it doesn't extend all the way down Commonwealth Ave in front of the prison property.
Right, okay.
The state jurisdiction probably extends, maybe 50 feet from the edge of the rotary or, maybe 100 feet, but it doesn't extend the full length of the property just because it's state property. That doesn't make it state right of way.
Okay, but still, if I were them, and it was important enough for the reconfiguration, I would use eminent domain, so they're obviously not me. So, but it opens things up more for what they could, reorganize about it.
They
Well, we'll see.
relocated Crosby's Corner.
That was.
Exactly,
I
and
was
that
thinking-
was a whole thing.
I was speaking with one of the, I think he was the I can't remember who it was, exactly what his title was. He was working with the state, he was one of the chief consultants, and he was saying basically that was one of their ideas was to push Commonwealth as far. Because there's no
As
limit,
far west as possible.
far away from where the current prison wall is as they could, because they said there's no reason not to until you hit
The
the
pond,
cemetery. They said that's the
Ah.
limit of
Right.
where it's reasonable to keep going.
yeah,
But they just said that it's all preliminary right now.
Yeah.
They have no idea. It's not gonna make sense to do that if you can't get the other roads to align that way, and all of a sudden, too much taking becomes insane, so.
yeah,
But I think the state is open to reconfiguring things. It's just gonna matter how much it costs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but if you think about land ownership around the rotary, there is not a lot of taking that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Other than you have the
Right.
gas station,
Mhm.
that's it. The state owns.
Well, what about the parking lot for the Brewsterman Rail Trail?
So once you get down that
That
far,
far? But that's about as far as they could move things anyhow, because the pond's right there. They can't fill the pond in.
so
Yeah.
So you think until you get to where the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail crosses,
There's not much to take.
there isn't any taking that they would have to do on that side. And then, as I said, the gas station. And on the other side, there's no takings that have to happen either until you get to Assabet Ave. So, it'll be interesting. But, you know, I think there is a realization, within the state agencies that for MCI to be successful, you at least have to have some reasonable idea of how the rotary is gonna be changed.
Yeah.
So today we did have the first meeting for the land use working group today. So just kind of give everyone a little synopsis of the previous, just to really look at all the buildings, municipal buildings in town, check the conditions that a lot of them are in pretty tough shape. But the concentration is gonna be on public safety and public works, looking at opportunities with all the land that is available to the town to either consolidate, relocate, but also address whatever, try to address the needs that we have. But again, there's also budget constraints with that, with, building a new fire station or police station, combined station, whatever it comes out to be. But that's what we're looking at right now. So we just had our first meeting today, and we should have one, I think, another week from today or tomorrow. So and then I don't know if Wendy has any updates for us.
No, I don't really have any, outside of, I think our goals are supposed to get finalized on Monday. Don't hold me to that though, but, MCI and the, wireless overlay district are already on the list of goals, and I've added the MBTA also to that list, so more to follow. I'll let Elizabeth know as soon as they're done.
Thank you.
And also during the meeting, that cellular, topic came up too, so that's gonna be, I think it's a lot of eyes are gonna be on that one, obviously. So, with that, we'll move on, if no one else has anything else with the, liaison stuff, we'll move on to the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for April 9th and April 29th, with the edits as submitted.
I have one more.
There was something I saw. I printed out this page just so I could mention it. And, oh no, I emailed.
Chair board, okay, so what page is that?
That's page 1 of
Page
29,
1.
but of the revised minutes, sorry, it's just one typo. I had,
So the second sentence, had a. You don't wanna be Chari?
Chari.
Chari
Chari.
Gordon, and Sue?
I emailed you and I forgot what I emailed you. I
Uh,
printed this piece of paper out to remind myself and I didn't write on it what it was.
it was,
It was on page 2 of the May 29 minutes.
did you email me and Heather?
I thought so. I emailed Heather and I thought I CC'd you. Unless I'm wrong. Last minute, so stupid.
I see that the minutes of 4/29 still refer to lots of possible waivers regarding mixed use. I'll raise the question at the meeting over what the appropriate terminology is. That I mention it now in case anyone has the bandwidth. I don't.
Yeah, it was that email, but which paragraph was it?
It doesn't, it says, I see that the minutes of 4/29 still refer to lots.
Oh, waivers, that's what it was. We said this was about mixed use. The minutes say aligning waiver criteria with specific site conditions or development standards, height and parking waivers were noted as particularly sensitive. But I thought this is about special permit criteria, not waivers.
No, within within the.
It is
423, yeah.
Okay,
there's
then this is
specific
fine as
waivers.
written.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. I withdraw the comment.
Yeah, you can get a waiver to the open space requirement, waiver
Okay.
to parking, and waiver to height.
You'd think I would remember after rereading the
No,
zoning
that's
bylaw
okay.
25 times in the last week, but no.
Okay.
So I once again make a motion to approve the minutes of April 9th and April 29th, with the edits as submitted.
I got a second, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.